Welcome back to Insights at ADIPEC 2022, where we're travelling deep into the minds of our experts and influencers to gain insights and perspectives on the challenges and opportunities facing the energy sector. And I'm your host, Aimee Ironside. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing decarbonisation in the Middle East and how far we can go to decarbonise critical energy infrastructure across the region. We'll be discussing the regulations and policies required to accelerate decarbonisation solutions, how we integrate renewable solutions into existing infrastructure and the challenges in modifying assets. And we'll be challenging whether we have the workforce and the skill sets required to undertake this. Today's experts have lots of rich insight and solutions, and I'm sure they're going to help us have a great conversation today. So I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Ryan and Stuart Turl. I'm going to ask you both just to share a very brief introduction, who you are, what you do, and what it is you do at Wood. So Stuart, I'll start with you.
Yeah, perfect. So my name is Stuart Turl. I'm Business Development Director for Energy Transition for Middle East, Europe and Africa, covering everything from hydrogen through carbon capture, decarbonisation, electrification, offshore renewables, and anything energy transition related.
Excellent. Chris?
My name is Chris Ryan. I'm the Wood Project Director for the BGC contract, which is a multi-billion-dollar gas capturing contract that we have in Iraq. And we're based in Dubai, but with a lot of people rotating through Iraq and as well as the local national workforce in Iraq.
Thank you very much. Brilliant to have you both join us here today. So I'll start off with saying, at industry events and roundtable discussions, we often hear that there's appetite and money to spend on decarbonisation opportunities, but the issue is not necessarily knowing where to spend it to get the best benefit. What do you see being needed in terms of more supportive regulations and policies to accelerate and bring these decarbonisation solutions to life and enable broader energy portfolios? Chris, I'll come to you first.
Well, obviously, having an emissions trading scheme, with being able to price carbon and having that rolled out through the government and partnered with industries and ensuring that drives the finance and the investment into the decarbonised solutions.
Yeah, no, so just to build on that, I think obviously financing is going to be one of the biggest challenges to making decarbonisation projects a reality. Carbon pricing is one significant way of supporting that. We've already seen Oman and Saudi Arabia announcing potential movements towards some sort of carbon pricing regime. There's no indicative timescale on that yet, but that's one way of obviously driving investment in these decarbonisation projects moving forwards.
Great. Anything else to add on that, Chris?
Well, there's a lot of focus within the Middle East, and they're really set up to be leaders within the decarbonisation industry, and then obviously the CCUS industry, currently accounting for about 10% of the world's carbon capture. There's also a lot of drivers within the use of carbon dioxide for enhanced oil recovery. So you see a lot of that driving the pilot projects which you've seen in Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and also in Qatar in the Ras Gas. So being able to drive or extend the life of declining fields, certainly ones that have been in production for a long period of time, and having that business case there, that should really drive greater interest towards carbon capture and decarbonisation.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd add on that is, I think, as with any sort of energy transition, energy project in general, particularly with decarbonisation projects, obviously investors are looking at surety of return for their investments. Developers are looking for surety of costs when it comes to their developments as well. You then couple that with first-of-a-kind technologies and new developments. There's a significant amount of risk there that needs to be taken by somebody, and whether that flows down to an EPC contractor or someone else, that risk is still there and inherent in the project. So I think carbon financing or balancing the equation through either government incentives or other sort of carbon pricing mechanism is one way of doing that. And I think also when you look at what other countries are putting in place in terms of supporting these projects, the UK have got their sequencing funding application round, for example, which is looking at two tracks of funding. The first one's been announced for, I think, $1.4 billion worth of funding for the Track 1 clusters, which are HyNet and the East Coast Cluster. So we're currently supporting on those. We're currently doing the fee design for the hydrogen network for the HyNet project. We're the integrated project management team on Net Zero Teesside, which is one half of the East Coast Cluster. And we're performing the fee design for the CO2 and hydrogen pipeline on the Net Zero Carbon Humber project as well. So we're supporting across those Track 1 clusters in the UK. And that government funding is obviously helping drive through that early engineering fee design activities.
Great.
I guess the one other point is surrounding that of green financing. There's a lot of interest, obviously, through the World Bank and the ability to get these high profile or high value decarbonisation projects or environmental projects throughout the world. And we're seeing some of that certainly in our Iraq operators being able to secure green financing to assist in their decarbonisation journey.
Very good. So I guess in more recent times, mega projects, greenfield developments are able to consider and plan how they reduce the carbon intensity of operations from quite an early stage, so kind of from the offset. But for existing and ageing infrastructure, how do we integrate renewable solutions like electrification or introduce carbon capture to decarbonise those assets? And what are some of the challenges that we face with modifying those existing assets, Chris, first?
Well, if you think about the contract that I'm currently working on, which is the Basra Gas contract. So this is an incorporated JV between the Southern Gas Company, Shell, and Mitsubishi, and with the purpose of capturing and decarbonising the flare gas. Central to their goal is to capture the flare gas and reduce the carbon emissions. They themselves have been able to secure the green financing loan through the World Bank, which helps drive these type of projects and makes them more feasible to get off the ground. Last year alone, our current client within their operations was able to avoid 20 million tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions through their operations and their flare gas capturing project. Currently, they capture around about 65% of the associated gas, and their plan is to capture 90% over the next 5 years. Now, obviously, other than the environmental benefits of this, you also see great social benefits with respects to creating power for the communities, as well as creating a revenue source for the country. So obviously countries where there's lots of the Middle East with lots of oil and gas production, there's huge opportunities to capture emissions. A lot of the challenges associated with that is, as you said, some of the locations, the ageing infrastructure, and getting the finance into these locations, and then assisting and partnering with our clients to get these solutions online.
Yep.
What are some, just on that, what are some of the real blockers and challenges? Because if it was easy, we'd be doing it all over the place, and it would really be a talking point. So what do you see as the real challenges on projects like the one that you're working on?
I'd say supply chain challenges, especially during COVID or coming out of COVID times, have been a big challenge. No one's been immune to this black swan event of COVID, and certainly the operators haven't. And when you've got projects that are difficult projects as it is to deliver, these additional challenges require resilience and certainly finance resilience and partnered resilience throughout the wider technical community. So finance is certainly one of the key challenges, getting competence within certain regions, the right competence, sustaining the workforce, and ensuring that the supply chains aren't heavily disrupted that can affect your business cases.
And just on the challenges piece, you mentioned electrification at the start of the question. I think the common soundbite used for offshore electrification is that it's as complex as open heart surgery. And obviously that's just because of the space and the weight constraints that we have on some of these topsides that are in operation at the moment. And that's just the brownfield modification side, actually trying to fit the equipment on the topsides for the brownfield modifications. That's not even accounting for where you get the power from. So is it power from shore, or are you looking at integrating power from floating wind or offshore wind, for example, and the associated control system challenges that come with that. So that's what we're trying to work on the Hywind Tampen project with Equinor, for example, for the EPCI brownfield contract, and integrating that intermittent wind power to enable electrification or partial electrification of the asset. We know that ADNOC are looking at Project Lightning in the Middle East, for example, which is a massive scale electrification project. So there are technical challenges involved, but they are interesting challenges that can be solved. So it's just a question of thorough engineering and commitment to it.
For sure, and I know, Stuart, that you're really at the heart, to use your pun, around particularly in the UK North Sea. And so do you see the kind of progress that's being made there, which is coming at pace? We're seeing some development. Do you see the export potential to bring that knowledge into? You talked about some Middle East projects around electrification. Do you see that?
I think so, and I think it's coupled with legislation incentives as well. So, for example, Crown Estate Scotland have recently announced the INTOG licence round for offshore wind, which is specifically targeted at innovation for floating wind, so developing new technologies. But the TOG part is targeted oil and gas, looking at electrification of offshore oil and gas assets. And those sort of bespoke licence rounds for offshore wind, specifically targeted at decarbonising oil and gas assets, is something that could provide an incentive. Obviously, it doesn't work in every geography. The Middle East potentially has a better case for power from shore, which is what the Project Lightning will be, and being able to utilise that HVAC technology.
Oh, great. That's good. And Chris, there's something you talked about, which is actually becoming a theme through all of our podcast discussions this week, around skills and sustaining a workforce that can actually help deliver on all these big ambitions, which we're hearing lots of throughout the show this week. So I guess if we just come to that, do you think we have the workforce to undertake the transition, to decarbonise conventional energy projects as well as the new energy projects in the Middle East? Or what are some of the challenges and opportunities you see there?
Well, certainly a lot of the skills are transferable, and we have very established workforce and very skilled workforce in the Middle East. However, Wood as a global brand and having global specialists such as man on my right here really is able to bring those capabilities and supplement those capabilities that can really make us a powerhouse in the region.
Yeah. No, definitely. And just to add to that as well, I think obviously Wood's created initiatives such as the Energy Transition Academy that is looking at specifically upskilling our existing workforce into energy transition specialisms. But the bedrock of that is the conventional discipline engineering that we have in-house. And the other thing I'd add is that I think when it comes to decarbonisation, you have decarbonisation-focused projects that are specifically targeted at decarbonisation, i.e. CCUS projects, green hydrogen, etc. But I think we need to get in the mindset of every project is a decarbonisation project, and looking to minimise the CO2 equivalents of any project that we're either designing, executing, delivering, operating, so that all of our workforce are purely focused on decarbonisation in everything we deliver.
Absolutely, a really key point. And Chris, with your experience in country with the teams supporting operations in Iraq and also those there on that really interesting project, do you see the kind of energy they get from being involved in something that they can see kind of tangible purpose towards? Oh,
absolutely. And everyone feels connected to the social and environmental good that we're doing in country. And it's very energizing when you get to see the faces and work with the people in country, and you see this sense of purpose and this sense of energy. So it's something you can be proud of, coming to work. Something that we talk about, when we get around the family and we talk about the things that we're doing and what we're proud of. So, yeah, that's really translating throughout the whole team.
Yeah,
and it's a really, it's important when it comes to attracting the talent that we need, right, in order to deliver on everything we've been talking about. That they do feel that connection, and the taboo around conventional energy. And I think to your point, every energy project is a decarbonisation project, whether you're producing oil and gas or hydrogen or solar, whatever the power is. So I think, knowing that that's coming is important. I'm just going to ask you another question, Chris, on, local talent development. I assume that that's a big part of what you do with the team in Iraq. I don't know if you could maybe just share some of that.
Yeah, so local development is a core focus. We have dedicated training development specialists, both for our Iraq business and for the specific project that I'm working on. We have a huge graduate intake each year. I think our intake was around 20 this year and similar last year. And these are really talented, motivated people, and they relish the opportunity to get that experience and to integrate into sort of the wider technical functions and specialties that Wood carries as a brand. And it's really a great opportunity for them and a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, and I think that localisation piece and local content requirements is only going to increase, particularly if government incentives and funding start coming into position. They're going to want, obviously, local content to be a core part of any project moving forward. So we can't bury our heads in the sands and imagine that we'll only be able to execute these projects with subject matter experts from the UK, for example. We need to drive that local content for each and every project.
Absolutely, for sure. So lots of great discussion, big targets, big ambitions, big potential, big opportunities, but of course some challenges but I think that we've discussed today we're well equipped to tackle. So if I can come to you both with a couple of key takeaways before we close up the conversation today. Stuart, I'll start with yourself.
Yep, no worries. I think my key takeaway is that there is a big challenge there, but I think it's making the impossible possible, really. It is looking at how we can support projects from early development phases, understanding what key drivers are for the projects, and then kind of identifying the best solutions and moving them forward. So I think we can work with our clients to really focus on what is needed for a specific project. And then you couple that with, obviously, government incentives and any other regulatory regimes that may be able to actually push a project through to execute. And hopefully we can actually start getting some of these projects in the ground.
Very good. Chris, anything from your side?
Yeah, I guess the key takeaway for me is really how the Middle East is positioned with a competitive advantage in this decarbonisation sector. Huge opportunities as well with converting grey to blue hydrogen, the talent of the workforce and the development of the workforce, and really just how we can play a part of really what is the challenge of our generation, and that is decarbonisation.
Yeah.
Very good. Brilliant conversation. Really appreciate you both joining us here today. And that brings us to the close of this Insight from ADIPEC 2022, where we explored the opportunities and challenges around how we can decarbonise critical energy infrastructure across the Middle East. Thank you both so much again, and we'll see you throughout the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.